So my name is Rachel Gamblin, and I have been part of NAMI since probably about 2015. I found the class because I was desperate for a way to help support my mom better and to actually learn about what she was going through. And so I found this class for help, just kind of out of desperate Google search. And I went through the family to family class myself in Southeast Houston. And I got so much out of the class. It really changed my life and turned around my mom's life eventually. And so I got so much out of the class that A, I wanted to take it again, and B, I wanted to give back to this great benefit that I had gotten. So I signed up to train and become a teacher for family to family, and then now I've been teaching since then, about once or twice a year. So my mom had schizoaffective disorder, and she struggled with it, we think, kind of since she was a child, although the symptoms were pretty mild. And then right after she had my younger sister, we think kind of a postpartum depression, kind of went untreated for a few years and kind of blew into this full-blown schizoaffective disorder. So she was in and out of involuntary mental hospitalizations, so Rusk State Hospital, Ben Taub here in Houston. And as a kid growing up, I really didn't know what was going on. Neither of us did. We would kind of be sent away to live with our grandparents for 6 months or a year while things were happening. We just knew that something was changing with the house and that we would come back eventually. And so we did that kind of all through elementary school. So a lot of the symptoms that she would experience would be she would have a really difficult time focusing and planning tasks. So our house was pretty dirty all the time. We didn't have a lot of discipline in the house. And now that I look back on it, I realize that this was all because she was kind of fighting with these voices in her head. So we would go to families therapy sessions. She would go to sessions by herself. And people kind of learn how to work the system over time, right? So people who have mental illness know the right answers to the right questions. So if you would ask her, does she hear voices? She would say no. But if you asked her, are you hearing the voice? She would say yes. And then she would talk to you about the voice in her head. So she would have mood swings. It would be really difficult to understand. She would be very, very angry for 1 minute about something that would seem innocuous. And then 2 hours later, she would want to be nice and make up and everything and just kind of pretend that nothing else had happened. So right. She also had trichotillomania, which is where she would like pull out her hair kind of compulsively. She would stand on the corner and yell at cars passing by, telling them to slow down. There were just kind of like a range of symptoms. And if you met her, you wouldn't really notice anything was off. But if you knew her kind of for longer than a week, then things would kind of start to show up and you'd start to see the symptoms come through. Our situation was a little bit different. So I went to the NAMI family to family class by myself. I think when I first went, I hadn't really accepted that she had a mental illness, honestly. I just thought, this is one thing I haven't tried, so let's go ahead and try it and see if there's any benefit there. And I really felt so welcomed by the people in the class. The teachers just made me feel like I was meant to be there. And I honestly, on that first day, I was looking for any excuse to turn tail and run because I didn't want this to be true. I didn't want my mom to have a mental illness. I wanted everybody else to have made a mistake. So I went to that first class by myself, and I went through the 12 classes after that. I kept finding reasons to come back because I kept learning, I kept getting things out of the material. And then it took about 2 years where I kept pushing my mom to go to the peer-to-peer class, and so she could learn about herself and what her brain is going through and hear stories from other people who might be going through similar experiences. Eventually what ended up happening is I convinced my dad to go to the family-to-family class, kind of the same way that I did, and my mom went with him because she was just so nervous and she was so attached. They had really not had a good marriage for the longest time, but when they started going to family again, even out of all the years of counseling and other things that they had tried, now they were finally starting to talk some more and finally starting to understand each other some more. So that's kind of an unusual case, but it just speaks to the the welcoming attitude of the teachers that we have in the family-to-family class, and how flexible the curriculum can be, and how much of a community it is that we really wanted to support people. So that's the tricky thing with people who have a mental health diagnosis, is that part of the illness is a lack of insight. They almost can't understand that there's something wrong with their brain. So I don't know that we ever got there, but when I first went to the class, she was completely unmedicated. She had, like I mentioned, Schizoaffective Disorder, which I think was treated primarily with Haldol, and she had not taken any of that. She also had diabetes and chronic myelogenous leukemia, which were also being unmedicated at the time. So this inability to treat the psychiatric disorder led to the inability to treat any of her other disorders. So her health just was declining over the years, and that's one of the things that made me so desperate to find the class. So over time, after I had taken the class, I understood how to communicate with her better, how to incentivize her, and how to eventually work with her to take her to those doctor's appointments. And we ended up getting the physical treatments before we did the psychiatric treatments, but we did eventually get there, and she started to see the benefits herself, right? And I was able to create a stable environment in my heart and my mind, and so she was able to respond to that and kind of trust me that I was going to let her be in control of her recovery, and that I had her best interest at heart. And so once she saw that, and I was not just saw it, but I was consistent about it, which I think is one of the things that the class teaches you, is you have to put your own thoughts aside, and you have to be open and honest the whole time. So once she saw that, we did start to see changes, and she got on one medication and then another medication, and then that first medication didn't work, so we tried a different one, and we tried a different therapist, and I did my best to be responsive to what she was feeling and what she needed and what she thought we should do. And like I said, over time, she started repairing her relationship with her husband. We started to do things together outside of the house. We started to have normal conversations instead of rambling paranoia or word salad. So we really saw a lot of changes, which was kind of what made it so tragic as we got into it. I mentioned her chronic myelogenous leukemia had been untreated for quite a few years, and when you don't treat it, it gets worse. So right after Hurricane Harvey, she actually was scheduled for a bone marrow transplant to treat the leukemia. However, she got a pretty bad lung infection right after Hurricane Harvey, and she went on a ventilator, and she just kind of fought it for a few months in the hospital, but eventually she ended up passing away. So we made a lot of progress that I'm extremely happy for, that the last couple of years that we did have, she was able to be present and to enjoy some things, like actually go out to parks or museums and have some energy and have some focus, and to share those things with my dad and my sister and myself. But ultimately, I do feel that this period of time that we spent unmedicated, where I didn't have the support of NAMI, is what ended up putting her in the position where the leukemia could take her. So I cannot stress enough how much support I have personally gotten from NAMI. Just from that very first class that I found desperately online from a Google search, the teachers on the very first day made me feel like I was welcome, like nothing was wrong with me or my family. And as I started to hear the stories of the people around me, the other students in the class, more and more I realized that I wasn't alone. Because I think that was the hardest thing to struggle with, is that I felt like there's no book about how to be the daughter of someone with psychotic episodes, right? There's no book to how to be a husband or a mother or child of someone who has psychotic episodes. So to see other people going through these struggles and hearing what their strategies were, and knowing that I could talk about what my problems were, and to talk about these problems to people who understood them, right? Because I could talk about them to my friends who didn't have mental illness issues in their family, but they they didn't really understand it because they can't. So you just haven't gone through it, you just don't understand. So I found that community, and I fell in love with every single person in that class, and I fall in love all over again every time I teach. So I do my best to support all of the students that come through the class, and I always feel supported by the staff here at NAMI, by the other volunteers, and by just the people who come in and are looking for help. They want to give help back too. So it's by far the most rewarding volunteer experience that I've ever done, and the most help I've ever gotten from a volunteer organization. NAMI has changed my life, period. And I've seen it change other people's lives. I've seen mothers and fathers and sisters and children come into the class, the family-to-family class, completely lost. And just basically at the end of their rope and looking for some kind of lifeline to try and right the chaos of their lives. Because when you have someone that you love so closely suffering so much, it's not like you can just let that person go. They're part of your life, they're part of your household. So I see people come in and their lives change in 12 weeks. Not maybe to what we would call quote unquote normal, right? But they improve and they change, and I see the people change as well. So I've seen it before, and I'm looking forward to seeing it again. So if you're like me and you didn't really want to accept the diagnosis, you didn't want to believe that this is what's happening to your loved one, I really recommend to come to the class and to listen to the other stories. And what happened for me was that I heard these stories and I said, that's my mom, word for word. These people don't know me, they don't know her, but somehow they're describing her perfectly. And one of the classes that we go through is we talk about the diagnostic manual that's used by care providers to actually help people who are struggling with these illnesses. And you say to yourself, well, even if you didn't want to accept it, at least now I have a name for it. And I have a book and I have a doctor that says, if this, then that. And it kind of gives you a battle plan. Some of the things that NAMI can do in terms of support for people who are experiencing these things is that we can point you into the direction of treatments that can help you. And that can be talk therapy, that can be group therapy. There are various centers throughout the Houston area that have done wonders in people's lives that I know personally. We also have a team of psychiatrists that might be able to recommend medication and work with you on a day-by-day basis to find out what works best for you. So if any of this sounds like you or a family member, a person that you love, if you're struggling with feelings or thoughts that you can't control and that are disrupting your life on a daily basis, I highly encourage you to come to either one of NAMI's classes or to come to one of our support groups and just listen. You'll know from yourself and your own experience whether or not this is going to be the best place for you.